All right, we are back with episode 46 of Modern Prescription. My name is Dr. Deepak Dugar.
And I'm Dr. Jeff Toll.
And today we are talking about how to stay alive. CPR.
We all want to stay alive.
Yeah, staying alive.
Especially in the middle of a high-stakes European football game.
Right. Christian Eriksen fell on the field, completely collapsed. And
they saved his life.
Yeah, and how did they save his life? And how could you do something like this at home for someone you love?
Yeah.
Let's talk about that. We're also going to talk about the new novel therapies for Alzheimer's, new drug. First of its kind.
Let's see if it works. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, we're going to talk all about it. We're also going to talk about a new drug for depression, which is not a new drug. It's a very old drug.
An old drug for depression.
That's being brought back.
We need new ideas for depression.
Yes, new ways to think about it.
We need to look at it again.
Yeah.
Because, the things we do now are helpful, but not always that helpful.
Right.
And there's people who try all the treatments that we have and they don't work.
Right.
And all they want is to be in a football stadium with 50,000 fans.
Right. With or without their real or fake vaccine card. We'll talk about fake vaccine cards.
Yeah. Do they need a mask or a fake vaccine card? Right. What is more effective against COVID?
The answer is get your vaccine.
I think so.
Thanks for listening, guys. A lot of great topics
Enjoy.
Today. We are back, episode 46. It's a lot of stuff today.
I can't believe it.
A lot of stuff today.
People much younger than we are dying on the pitch.
I know. So Christian Eriksen, you're referring to.
Yep.
The Denmark soccer player, football player for the rest of the world.
Yep.
Collapsing on the pitch.
He collapsed and apparently, died momentarily.
Momentarily, yeah.
And thankfully, CPR exists, and thankfully they resuscitated him. And I think my understanding is they shocked him back into a normal rhythm, and they saved his life. And now he's, normal, didn't lose any function as far as we know.
So how can a young, healthy, super fit soccer player just collapse like that?
Yeah, so this guy's, like a world-class player. He plays on Inter Milan, which is one of the best clubs in the world. And he's 29 years old. Obviously, these guys played 90-minute football games and are in incredible shape.
Yeah, on a regular basis.
So it's unclear. I don't think we know fully yet, although this type of thing has happened before in sports where players die on the field or on the basketball court.
Basketball players we hear a lot about.
Yeah. And so the most common reason is something called hypertrophic cardiomyopathy. And this is a condition where the heart muscle is accidentally building too much muscle in the septum of the heart. Mm-hmm. And if it's a genetically acquired trait usually that you get.
Right.
So commonly there's some family history of heart disease, heart failure, something like that. And so if someone has this trait and lives long enough, typically eventually they'll have symptoms of congestive heart failure, things like edema, shortness of breath, etc. But occasionally, because of the thickening of the muscle, it disrupts the electrical signal of the heart, and it can cause a sudden arrhythmia and death.
Right. You see this on basketball courts. At least a couple of times they've been documented where a kid will just fall on the basketball court and just die.
Right.
And it's usually always cardiomyopathy.
Yeah. So we don't know yet officially, but I think that's likely what happened. Mm-hmm. And so what happens is your heart goes into usually ventricular fibrillation. You don't get enough blood pressure and, you collapse, which is what happened.
Well, to people who don't understand, so the heart is a muscle. Right? So it's just a physical muscle.
It's a pump.
And it pumps the blood into these giant arteries that then flow into smaller arteries that then disperse into capillaries that then go into tissues. And that's how your blood flows throughout the whole body.
Right.
And the oxygenation happens on the cellular level. But the pump itself is also wired electrically.
Yeah,
electrical
so
circuits.
The heart, obviously the heart is it's a pump and a muscle. Mm-hmm. And so its job is to pump. If you just look at it big picture, the job of the heart is to pump blood up to all the organs, the brain, the kidneys, and make sure, all of the rest of the body's happy. But it also has to pump blood to itself. So basically, there's sort of two parts of the heart system whenever we talk about how well someone's heart is doing. One is the heart pumping okay and getting blood to itself okay? So when you hear about someone having a heart attack, that's something different. That's a blocked artery where the heart's not able to pump blood to itself.
Right.
An electrical problem.
That's where a part of the heart is losing perfusion.
Exactly. So the heart is pumping blood to all the rest of the body and the brain and the other organs, but it's also pumping blood to itself. So if one of those arteries gets blocked, that's what would be called a heart attack.
And that's the extreme pain that you get in your chest radiates down your arm, your left arm usually.
Yeah, classically.
Got it.
And then it also, the way that the heart knows to pump is an electrical system in the heart. And so, when we take an EKG and we're looking at someone's electricity, that's how we're assessing that electrical function. And so sometimes someone may have a normal heart rhythm, 99% of the time, and then all of a sudden have an arrhythmia like this, which causes a sudden death. Other times people may have electrical problems in general where they're constantly having less lethal types of arrhythmias but are going on much more often.
So what would someone do? Let's say you're at home and your mom or your dad or your brother passes out on the floor right now. What are the basics of CPR for somebody who has no recollection and did not pay attention in school?
So when someone passes out, initially, the first thing to figure out is, do you feel pulses or not? So the easiest place to feel a pulse is in the neck and the carotid artery. That's the closest to the surface, usually the easiest to feel. And if you really don't feel any carotid pulses, that means obviously there's no blood going up to the brain, which is not good.
Right.
And so if you're really able to see if they're having pulses or not, and if they truly are not having pulses, that's usually when you start initiating CPR.
Right.
And so CPR is basically...
But before CPR, so the classical training was always ABCs. Airway, breathing, circulation. So check the airway, make sure the airway is clear. So open their mouth because sometimes they choked on something. And that's why they can't breathe. And then B, you want to feel for breath and see if they're having any airway actually moving in and out of their nose or mouth. Because if they're breathing, then you feel much more confident. They're not choking. They're not.
If they're breathing, they're not
cardiac.
dead and they don't need CPR.
Yes, exactly. Because if they're breathing, they're moving air, then they're completely, it's different. But it could still be CPR if they're moving air, but not choking on anything. And so that's where CPR becomes. So with CPR, what are the basic maneuvers that the average person should know? Not a sexy doctor like yourself.
So the basic life support BLS, which is what, a lot of people learn, non-physicians, but also just kind of like people who want to be CPR certified. That's what they learn, basic life support. So the main thing nowadays, it used to be much more complicated where we were doing mouth-to-mouth breathing and all this other stuff. But now it's really just chest compression based. And the reason is when you push on someone's chest, you are actually helping their heart pump blood forward.
Right.
But also the recoil of that actually makes them get air inside also and breathe air in and out. And so you're actually doing both at the same time. So you're supposed to do chest compressions. Every 30 seconds, you can take a quick break to see if they've regained consciousness, check for pulses again, see if they're breathing again.
Right.
And that may be a good opportunity to switch who's doing the chest compressions because it's very exhausting to give good deep compressions that are actually doing the job. It's helpful if you're not the only one there for a second person to actually be feeling for pulses during the compressions. Those are going to be false pulses of the compression, but they're meant to feel whether they're adequate compressions.
Right.
So if you feel pulses during the compressions, that doesn't mean you can just stop.
Right.
You actually have to feel for the pulse during the compression, making sure they're adequate, and then you feel for pulses when you've taken your quick assessment break, and then you're checking for the pulses at that time, because if they're present, that means actually the person's recovered potentially, and you can actually stop, and they may be awake or waking up.
And with compressions, you want to use two-hand technique, one hand overlapping the other. You want to put all the pressure into your shoulders down, so you don't want to bend your elbows. Keep your shoulders completely straight. Elbows locked, and you're pushing complete pressure down. And you want to go as quickly as possible. You never really stop unless you have someone to switch with. If you have someone to switch with, then you can take a break, like you said, every 30 seconds. Otherwise, you just keep going. Compressions is the key. Early compressions is the highest significant reason people recover from cardiovascular issues.
If you're doing adequate compressions, you could be doing it actually for hours and still getting enough blood to the brain. And if eventually you can fix the underlying problem.
Right.
So in this case, if the underlying problem was an arrhythmia, what you really need is an AED. You need to shock their heart back into a normal rhythm. So shocking the heart the analogy I give is like restarting the computer. So you're like, your computer's frozen and this time clock circle's going around and you can't make anything open.
Right.
And then you just restart your computer and it's totally fine. That's kind of what happens with the heart. It's the electrical signal is not doing the right thing. You shock it, and then immediately sometimes it comes back into the normal rhythm.
And AEDs are usually available in malls or shopping centers, like wherever you are. There's usually an AED. Yep. And the good thing about AEDs is they make them for dummies. Like it's nowadays, really basic. Yes. It literally, when you turn it on, it says clear patient, remove all clothing, put on red sticker, put on blue. Like it tells you exactly what to do.
It. And so in the old days, you remember those TV shows where there would be these the doctor with the two paddles and you throw the gel on them and you rub them together and you
shock them.
You scream at everyone to clear before you shock someone. It's much more controlled. So the machine is actually telling you, everybody clear back.
Yes, exactly.
Stop touching the patient. Right. And then they tell you what to deliver. And they actually analyze the rhythm for you to know if it's a shockable rhythm or not.
Right.
So you don't, even the doctors, in the hospital, we have a more advanced one and we can look at the rhythm ourselves and print out EKG strips and stuff like that. But the basic one works very, very well.
Very well.
And that's the one that your firefighters or ambulance, the first emergency responders are going to have.
Yeah, but I think the key of the moral is, number one, call for help. Don't forget that part. Yeah. Don't be a superhero by yourself. Yeah. Number two, check airway and breathing and circulation immediately and start compressions as soon as you can. Yeah. If they're non-responsive and they're not choking on something, compressions immediately.
And when in doubt, compressions, because if they're awake or going to be awake, they will tell you to fucking stop bashing my chest. Because you will, it's painful.
Yeah,
I've done CPR many times in my life.
Yeah,
I've cracked people's ribs.
Right.
We've had people who were dead and they're alive and they're in pain for a week because of broken ribs, but they're happy that you did it for them. So.
Yeah. In residency, we used to say that if you broke their ribs, you did a good job at CPR.
Yeah.
If you didn't break the ribs, it means you weren't pushing hard enough.
Yeah, especially on elderly people. You got to give a good enough compression to get the blood circulating.
Right. Because broken ribs they can heal from, but if you don't get that circulation back, they will die.
Yeah. So the
Christian Eriksen,
Chris came back.
Yeah.
And Romelu Lukaku scored a goal and dedicated it to Chris. And, people around the world very happy. And he may have to retire. I think, obviously, we don't know what the underlying cause was, obviously.
Right.
But obviously, I'm happy he's alive.
Yeah, it was interesting because they finished the game without him afterwards. And there's a lot of controversy about whether they should have or shouldn't have done that.
Yeah.
And one of the doctors that was in the hospital was commenting on the psychological effects of doing that instead of giving you making it feel like players are just whatever. If you get sick, we'll continue.
The game. They played it later.
Without him though. But the question was, should they have done that or not? There's a lot of controversy about that because with players and mental health, there's a lot today that's never been brought to light before. The Michael Jordan era. You suck it up and deal with it, right? That's how Mike was. But now today, I think mental health is becoming a lot more of a forefront in tennis, especially. Yeah. Young superstar tennis players, a lot of them are being more vocal about mental health issues. Just recently, the young champion, half black, half Asian, she is a legend, Naomi. Yeah. She stepped out of the French Open because
she didn't want to do the media sessions.
She didn't want to do the media sessions because she felt like every time she does them, it makes her feel bad. Like she just goes, it wasn't good for her. She was already struggling with depression and anxiety, and then doing the interviews makes it even worse for her. So she just said she didn't want to do it. Yeah. But then they were trying to punish her for not doing the interviews.
Well, I guess they're contractually obligated to do the media session.
Right. For ad dollars, it's all money.
Yeah. And there's been a lot of players over the years who deal with it I remember Marshawn Lynch in the Super Bowl things, wearing sunglasses and eating Skittles during the interview. Not answering any questions.
Right. To the point where they had to now change the format of the interviews. You have to wear certain clothes and you can't be wearing sunglasses. Yeah, very ironic. But speaking of sports though, what's the deal with these fans? So there's like 40,000 fans in these stadiums. Is that cool? Are you back?
I think if you're vaccinated, pretty much you're back. I think there is going to be some very low number of breakthrough infections where people don't get as sick as they would have, but we're getting to when there's enough people vaccinated, especially in an event, there's still very low likelihood of someone getting the risk of someone getting sick there being more than the risk of someone getting sick from some other virus at a game normally.
Right, especially outdoor sports arenas. Because outdoor, I feel like the risks are so much lower
So much less.
than anything else. Like, I think elevators are probably the worst place. You know, packed elevators are way worse than an outdoor stadium.
Right.
Because concerts are probably going to resume this year, I assume.
I think so. I think every country, state is going to have their own different rules. I know California is always the most restrictive with the rules and stuff. But June 15th now, everything's about to change.
Yeah, mask mandate in LA is going away June 15th, which is pretty crazy given how strict things have been here.
Yeah.
You know, I remember your episode with your brother talking about how they just, you know, LA decimated the entire restaurant business.
Yeah.
And I think it's really amazing that we're able to go back and lose the mask. The question is going to be, is the mask mandate is a citywide thing, right?
Right.
So do private businesses, are they still going to require masks? Should they be allowed to require masks? Vaccine card proof? I was invited to a dinner last week on Wednesday night, and my friend who's organizing it needed all of us to send our vaccine cards in. And so all of us had to text our vaccine cards. Yep. Is that going to be the new norm?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question and challenge. So I think individual businesses always have the right to have whatever rules they want.
Right.
But the question is that would it ruin their business because people want to just go to a restaurant and not have to wear a mask? So if you do mandate it, would people not go there?
Right.
Other than, you know, people who are really worried about it. It's weird because in the restaurants, the rules made no sense. It would be one thing if the rules had made sense.
Mm-hmm.
So for the last, you know, few months, people have been able to go to a restaurant, sit down, take their mask off, eat their whole meal. And then suddenly if they stand up to walk to the bathroom, put your mask on.
Right,
it was doing nothing. There was no point. It wasn't. So there's really no difference between that and like there's no reason when someone is waiting for their table standing.
Right.
They have to have a mask on. And then as soon as they sit, magically, they're no longer a risk to anyone else and they can take their mask off.
Right.
So it really didn't make sense ever.
I think LA was so strict, or most cities, but LA especially was so strict because every restaurant was just scared of getting fined or shut down. Yeah. Right. The health inspectors were going around like, you know, like bulldogs shutting people down for violating. Right. So I understand that perspective and fear of it. I think that the long-term masks will always have a small role. I think elderly, people at risk, people non-vaccinated at risk for sure. Because there's a lot of people who do not get vaccinated, unfortunately.
Yes.
You still should. You still should. Yep. But those who haven't, and I know a lot of young friends, a lot of my own young friends, non-medical obviously, but they just don't want to get vaccinated and they have fake vaccine cards. So this is now a thing. Fake vaccine cards is becoming a thing. And so people are forging vaccine cards, unfortunately, so they can travel. Because the problem is you can't travel, you can't do certain things, you can't go to certain concerts without uploading a vaccine card. And so that's going to become an issue.
That's a shame. I mean, I've talked about this before. I think if you're young and healthy, you know, your personal risk from getting COVID would be low. And I get people saying, you know, I'm healthy. I don't want to get the vaccine.
And I've already had COVID,
Or if I've already had COVID, I think that's even more of a reason. But even for the people who didn't have COVID, you know, it's really, again, it's for societal benefit.
Yeah.
The reason to get the vaccine is because it helps end the pandemic.
Yes.
And so, you know, other generations I've used this too, but other generations were drafted to go fight in wars and way worse stuff. All we're asking is to get a vaccine, which we've seen hundreds of millions of people get and is safe to get.
Yeah, it's very safe to get. And that goes to the controversy about, you know, they talked about how Mark Zuckerberg had an amazing opportunity during the pandemic, that Facebook and Instagram could have been these amazing sources of positive education and positive reinforcement. Yeah. And instead, they became the biggest source of pain and misinformation, of just complete spreading propaganda for misinformation.
Yeah. I think Mark's always struggled with
how to
control what he's, it's kind of like Pandora's box that he doesn't really have. I don't think he has control over it.
Right.
Like they change the algorithm and then it'll have some other unintended consequence half the time.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I think they created something too big.
It's
too big to manage.
The machine learned how to make people click.
Right.
And I don't know if it can even undo that.
Right. As priority.
And then when they are the ones deciding what to take off, then that seems not like, because then you're empowering that. Then the problem is then Mark Zuckerberg or Facebook's algorithms are then in charge of what's true and not true.
Right.
So, and you don't really want that either.
No, not at all. Not at all. And Facebook and Instagram, the one thing that I think that it's nice to see other platforms come alive, like TikTok.
Yeah.
Even though it was under some severe regulation concerns during COVID, but it's nice because you have to remember back in the day, Friendster and MySpace.
Yeah.
Those pages were just as good. They were way more customizable than Facebook. The only reason Facebook did so well is because it was cool, exclusive, and because its load time was less. So it had instant load time. So when you clicked on Facebook, it would pop up in less than a second.
Right.
Versus Friendster and MySpace had a slower load time because it was all these customized pages.
Yeah, with the music.
Yeah, remember you could have put music? Yeah. Do you still have your MySpace profile?
It could be there.
It's
I don't
probably
know.
Somewhere.
I don't think I have my password anymore. Is it up still?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Maybe
everyone should check.
Maybe everyone should just go back to MySpace.
Yeah, because then we can control the narrative
top
again.
8.
Yeah. Get your best friends.
Your best friends or whatever, not have to argue with people about why they weren't in your top.
But TikTok.
The problem with TikTok, though, is that people are going on there for they're also misinformation.
Yeah, a lot of misinformation.
Especially going on there for new health trends.
Yeah, let's talk about those. The worst trends of TikTok just came out, the list of the worst trends. So the first one was TikTok users are using nail files to file down their uneven teeth. Basically, they put a nail tile at the bottom of their teeth.
The videos are basically you put a nail file, which is obviously flat, at the bottom of your teeth. And if all your teeth aren't flushly flat against it, you're supposed to file them down.
God, that's the most ridiculously dangerous thing I could ever do. It's not the same thing as filing your fingernails. If you file your fingernails, they grow back, right? You file your tooth down, it's not coming back.
No.
And that's enamel that is very precious and very important because if you file too deep, you could be getting to the roots. You could also be causing permanent damage, chipping, weakening. It's all types of nasty, terrible things.
Don't do it.
Yeah, nerve damage, sensitivity. You could even file down enough that you actually hurt the inner layers and then your tooth dies.
It sounds terrible. Terrible.
So that's the number one. Number two, people started super gluing vampire fangs to their teeth so that they could look like fangs.
Well, that one doesn't seem as bad. But the problem is they're using like industrial strength glue.
Yes.
Like that eyelash lady or whatever.
the one who had to have multiple surgeries to get the glue out of her hair. Remember that thing in the pandemic?
The gorilla
glue.
Oh my God. We've come a long way.
At least now
we're back.
They're using it inside their mouth though, which is even worse. Because it's poisonous. This
now
is
we're
not
back
supposed
with
to be
50,000 people screaming at soccer games. So.
Right. Which is much better.
That's better than Gorilla Glue.
But yeah, do not use Gorilla Glue in your mouth. This is not a safe way to do it. If you want to do something like that temporarily, there's things called ortho wax, which is actually bone wax, which you can put inside your mouth. It sticks temporarily, comes right off. But do not put super glue inside your mouth.
So if you want fangs, ortho.
Yes, ortho glue. Do not put permanent glue that literally will kill you at some point or crack your tooth.
Yeah.
Because the toxin poison could kill you. Another one where patients are getting what they're called veneers. So basically patients are going abroad to get really beautiful teeth, right? They want to get veneers like these celebrities get.
Yeah.
The problem is when you do veneers classically, it's on teeth that need veneers, first of all. It's not on healthy, beautiful teeth. And then what they do is they shave down the actual natural tooth so they can stick a veneer on it. The problem is these young kids don't need veneers and they're shaving down their natural, healthy teeth to place veneers, which is going to cause huge long-term consequence.
Yep.
And it's going to require they're going to lose some of these teeth and they're going to require dental implants long-term, which is much more complicated.
Yeah, you should only be getting veneers if you're in your 20s, if you're a professional hockey player.
yeah, who's had their teeth knocked out. Exactly right. But yeah, do not get veneers just cosmetically as a young patient. This is ridiculous. Another one, COVID-19 patients who've lost their taste of sense, their sense of taste, have been taking shots of Everclear to see if they can taste alcohol. What do you think about this, Jeff?
Well, Everclear is that one you can't taste, right?
It's supposedly.
Put it in the juice, in the jungle juice.
Yeah, we're aging ourselves right now. The young kids don't even know what jungle juice is.
If you're listening to this and you know what jungle juice is, I'm happy. If not, you're too young. And I won't tell you what it is. You can look it up. But you would pour Everclear with some Tampico or Hawaiian punch or something.
Yeah, and maybe a bottle of 151.
All the ingredients other than the Everclear were like $1 or $2.
Yes, and the Everclear is a $20 bottle, and it usually came in a plastic bottle.
Yeah, plastic bottle.
And it was one of the highest alcohol concentrations, and it got everyone tipsy for cheap.
There you go.
But Everclear should not be consumed. Shots of Everclear is extremely dangerous. It can actually burn your mouth and your esophagus. In highest cases of alcohol poisoning from
Really?
things like Everclear. Yeah.
The kids are drinking less these days though than they used to.
I think that's a good and bad thing. I think it's also because drug use is up, but I think healthy drug use is probably better than drinking in some instances. With
like marijuana
legalized,
use or other
like
drugs?
legalized marijuana. Yeah,
Okay,
yeah. No, I think like controlled use.
Yeah.
Not uncontrolled. But I think drinking is by and far the most unhealthy thing you can do if you're going to do it uncontrolled.
Well,
like the way college kids drink.
Yeah.
It's terrible.
I think, cocaine.
Oh, yeah. That stuff I'm definitely not, talking about.
But yes, marijuana is probably less bad for you than drinking.
Yeah. But that being said, long-term studies are still, up for debate on what marijuana does to the brain. And
there's effects for sure. Memory effects and some
Alzheimer's, question about
Effects.
Alzheimer's.
Yeah. Brain changes for sure.
So speaking of Alzheimer's, what is going on? There's a new drug.
Something really exciting, except not very exciting. So what happened was the first Alzheimer's drug in almost 20 years, I think like 18 years, was approved last week by the FDA.
Wow.
And I was super excited. So I started clicking because, I have a lot of elderly patients and a lot of people who feel like they're at the beginning of memory change. So I was trying to understand, is this for end stage Alzheimer's, early treatment? What is it? What are we doing? And the data is not good, So they had an 11-doctor panel, expert panel of neurologists looking into the drug. 10 of them actually voted not to approve the drug. So this is a drug that's supposed to slow the Alzheimer's, slow the memory changes. And it really did not do a great job of doing that and had quite a bit of side effects, including brain swelling and some other stuff. And also the drug is extremely expensive, like $56,000 per year.
And it's called Aduhelm.
Yeah, it's a biologic drug.
Got it.
And, $56,000 a year is very expensive for a drug for someone, especially for a patient with advanced Alzheimer's where you're not even reversing anything, you're just slowing down progression. So you could argue even from a cost standpoint, if you don't even consider the fact that it's not effective, it may not be worth approving. But it also is not very effective. So I was very surprised that the FDA approved it against the votes of the expert panel, which is the first time that that's happened in quite a while.
So the concept is that the patients who were on the drug, there's 3,482 patients. The ones that were on the drug, they showed some reduction in their amyloid beta plaque in the brain. And that's why they're approving it.
Well, there are some drugs, so most drugs we try to get approved based on some clinical outcome. So, like the statin drugs, for example, they're approved because they lower your risk of having heart attack and stroke. They also lower your cholesterol numbers. And so when we do those studies, we're looking at multiple things. Some of them are they improving certain biomarkers or numbers? And then ultimately, are they improving outcomes?
Right.
And you want drugs to be approved that improve outcomes. So this is a blood pressure pill. It lowers your actual risk of stroke significantly.
Right.
And that is a way to get that drug approved. That's much better than a drug that gets approved that it lowers your blood pressure numbers. So it gets your number from 140 down to 130, but actually people who are on that for 10 years, it doesn't lower the risk of stroke. We wouldn't like to use that drug versus one that actually lowers the risk of stroke and gets the numbers down.
Got it. So just following the numbers is where it can get dangerous.
Yeah. So again, cholesterol is an example of that. Blood pressure is an example of that. So for an Alzheimer's drug to make some minor improvements on an MRI scan, but not have clinically significant outcomes like this person's cognitive scores on a test are better, then you get into this danger zone of like, we're treating an MRI with $56,000 a year and they may not be clinically better. So it's making no difference in that person's life.
It sounds like it got fast-tracked, though, just because of the fact that
it's a new Alzheimer's drug.
And for a serious condition where initial evidence shows the potential to address an unmet medical need. So basically because there's nothing else out there. So just like the COVID vaccines. But that's
not a good reason to approve it, I don't think.
Yeah, so interesting.
The COVID vaccine, I think, is very different because this was a very deadly virus and it was potential to save many, many lives, which it did, and it turned out to do. Alzheimer's is a chronic condition where, there's, first of all, less people affected by it, but also the patient themselves often wouldn't know if there's a minor difference.
Right.
That that's not clinically significant. It may not, if it's not going to get the person back to who they were before the Alzheimer's, is it worth that much expense if it's not making a difference?
Right. And they're saying the common symptoms that can happen from taking the drug are related to the fact that you can get some swelling in these amyloid areas. Yeah. So you can get some headache, confusion, dizziness, vision changes, nausea, or angioedema, urticaria, headache, fall, diarrhea, confusion, delirium, altered mental
everything
status,
possible. But I think the main thing I read the study, and the main thing they were concerned about is the brain swelling.
Yeah.
And so they were recommending even potentially having to do serial MRIs in these patients to make sure that there's no brain swelling.
Very expensive.
So all of it gets super expensive and probably not that helpful.
Probably not that. Well, to speak of a cheaper drug option that is also being considered novel therapy, laughing gas.
There you go.
Extremely cheap. Old one. Extremely cheap.
Yeah.
So laughing gas is being much smaller study touted from this 24 patient study that it might help with treatment recalcitrant depression. So people who are depressed and cannot get medications to help, they're showing that laughing gas might work.
People seem pretty happy when they're taking the laughing gas.
Yes, very. I think it's like giving someone.
Did ENT used to use laughing gas for small procedures?
Sedation cases. Yeah. Till today we still do. There's a newer
for like
version
endoscopies and stuff.
Yeah, for endoscopies, but also like for anything that's going to be a little bit painful. So even sometimes like biopsies or cutting things out. There's even a newer version called Pronox. It's the same concept, but at a much lower dose. Okay. So laughing gas usually is at about a 50% concentration, which is pretty high.
What's in laughing gas?
Nitrous oxide.
Okay.
Yeah, and it just gets you, that 50% gets you a little loopy. It basically dilates the oxygenation that you're getting in your body, which just like when you have nitrous in a balloon and you inhale it, right? It's diluting the oxygen.
Does it also give you the funny voice thing?
Laughing gas technically doesn't because it's different formulation of the gas, but the concept is the same. Yeah, the concept is the same.
Because that's part of why you laugh when you do the balloon thing.
Yeah, and the voice gets weird because the vocal cords are in a different pitch. Yes, yeah.
I like that.
But yeah, laughing gas for depression, I think it's interesting. The reason they're trying this and thinking about this is because ketamine has been used now recently for depression and working extremely well. They're using ketamine nasal sprays.
Yep.
So nasal sprays using ketamine, and that's been working wildly well. So they're trying novel things, and psychedelics are the next step. So there's lots of these different ways that we're trying to reprogram. And just like with the heart, you're restarting the computer.
Yeah.
Trying to do the same thing with depression.
With the brain.
Restart the computer with the brain.
Yeah. And that's work. We've seen it work with, electrical therapy. It's just, that's a very scary, it looks very scary, but it works really, really well.
Yeah, you see those videos from the 50s and 60s.
Yeah, well then, so now they do it under sedation and they give people paralytic agents so they don't actually have convulsions.
Right.
And it works really well, but it's it's intense to do that.
Yeah,
I think we need a reset. We need a reset button.
Yeah,
like on the old Nintendo, original NES.
Yeah.
You just had to hit reset.
Right, reset, and then you'd have to blow in the cartridge.
Yeah, blow in the cartridge.
Kids today will never know.
They'll never know what that is. They have a Nintendo now. It's like a mini Nintendo, and it has like every game that Nintendo had, like 80 games.
Because now the memory is so big.
Yeah, one little tiny thing can have all the games. Well, those games that were so low.
Oh my God, graphic,
but good.
So low.
But better.
But if you understand what jungle juice is and you know what blowing in a cartridge for a video game is, you're our type of people.
Yeah, exactly.
You're our type of people.
Maybe so would you recommend laughing gas with the jungle juice or separately?
I think separately. I don't think mixing is a good idea.
Got it.
I think separately. And last but not least, Elon Musk versus Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is saying that he's actually going to go to space himself. 11 minutes in space he's committing him to.
With his brother, right?
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, that's what I read.
But they're committing to actually getting into space himself, which is
I read that he's going to space with his brother.
I don't know. Is this a good idea?
The funny thing was, I read this article side by side with another article about how his ex-wife has donated $6 billion this year. Yeah. And I was thinking, it's like, does he just need to get outside a little bit? He's like, he's frustrated. He's just thinking about that, and he's like, oh, I got to get to space.
I think
it's a rich version of taking a walk outside.
That's right. It's where do you go after you have the most expensive everything in the world and you have conquered everything that the planet Earth?
I thought Elon was going to make it to space first.
Well, he's made it to space, but the question is, you mean Elon himself
Personally,
physically?
yeah.
Yeah. That's kind of interesting that Elon hasn't physically gone to space yet.
Yeah. I think, well, he's nervous, obviously. He's not confident in his rockets.
Or he just thinks that the risks of anything bad happening would take away from the goal, and his goal is more important than his personal desire to go to space.
I want to see him on Mars walking around. That's when he's really made it.
If he's physically on Mars.
He's got to get to Mars in his lifetime.
Let's see. That
he
might
may
be
wait
tough.
till he's on that Alzheimer's drug.
Right. Or then you don't even know where you are. Well, thank you guys for listening. Great episode. Continue to listen. Lots of guests. Lots of really, really great, amazing segments coming up. We're going to try to teach and educate as much as we can. And remember the pearls of CPR, compressions, nonstop, and call for help. And if you have any questions, please DM us, ask us in the comments on our Instagram or YouTube pages, and continue to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks for listening.